1,000 times I fell, still your mercy remains. Should I stumble again, till I'm caught in your grace, everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades, never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. Justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out, everlasting. Your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame, and the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out of my soul. Cries out. Your will of all else, my purpose remains. The art of losing myself in bringing you praise, everlasting. Your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame. My heart and my soul, Lord, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out, everlasting. Your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame, everlasting. Your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame, and the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out of my soul. Cries out from the inside out of my soul. Cries out, everlasting. Your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame, and the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out of my soul. Cries out from the inside out, my soul. Cries out. out from inside out, Lord, my soul cries out from inside out, Lord, my soul cries out. Cries out, my soul cries out, my soul cries out from the inside, my soul cries out, cries out from the inside. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame, and the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out from the inside out, Lord, my soul cries out.
Welcome to our service. We're so glad you have connected with us today. And if this is your first time, we certainly hope it's not your last. That's what we say every Sunday. And if you are looking for a church, we are looking for you. So whenever you want to connect in person, online, just let us know. We would love to connect with you and get to know you, and perhaps may get connected during the week so we can actually get to know you. We believe that you cannot grow spiritually unless you go relationally. So we are a church that connect people with God and others. That's our purpose. That's our mission. That's why we exist. So if you're looking for a church, guess what? We're looking for you. And today we're in the third part of our series. This is the third part and the last part of this series that speaks about three questions everyone has about God. We've been talking about these three questions. The first question that we were dealing with was the question, who is God? Because many of us have a different picture of a different answer about that question. And depending on the quality of the answer that we got when we asked who was God, who is he, it has a lot to do with how we actually see God, how we actually perceive it, how we actually relate with him. What's our relationship? So depending how you were introduced to the God, how that question was answered determines the quality of your faith. Because we were talking that lame answers lead to a lame faith. So this today, and in the second part, we spoke about the question, is it worth it? Is it worth it to actually follow God? Is it worth it to follow Jesus? Because we know that it costs too much to do it. But the question is it worth it? And we were talking about to where he's taken us If it's worth it, it depends where he's taking us. And he's taking it to a place where our faith will overcome our fear. So imagine what you would do tomorrow if you know that you will not be fearful, that you will not be scared, that you will not fail. And it doesn't matter what happens, everything will be all right. Imagine what you would try, how you will live, how will you actually have your life. And we've been talking about that. And today we're going to go into the third question that everyone, I had that question. I'm surely you had that question before. Everyone has this question when they actually introduced to this idea of God, that he exists, that everything was created with a purpose, with a plan. We all have this question. And the question that I want to wrestle with today, that I know you had, is the question, does God has a plan for me? The question, does God have a plan for me? How many of us, in some kind of way, we have asked that question, if God has that plan in my life? Many times since I can remember, I asked myself the question, if God had a plan for me. And guess what? There was a point that a lot of us, and maybe that's where you are today, that's where I was, I don't know the plan that God has for me. I didn't know the plan that he had for me. I didn't know the plan that he had for my life. So at this point in my life, I didn't know where to go, what to do. And because I didn't know that he had a plan for me, I didn't actually live out the plan. I didn't actually live according to the plan. And sometimes, maybe this is where you are today. You don't know and you don't believe if God has a plan for you, because sometimes what's happening in your life doesn't look like what you're expecting. It's not like what you're looking for, what you've been thinking that you were going to be at this point in your life. And worse, in my case, I remember when I was 18 years old, I feel like I missed God's plan for my life. I missed it. I feel like I actually lost out of the plan because of what I was doing, where I was relationally, with my relationship, where I was in my life financially, where I was, and everything that I was doing at that point. I feel like I missed God's plan for my life. And because of how the results I was getting in my life, I said, maybe I lost it. I missed it. It's not the time for me. And worst, I know you've been there because I've been there. And sometimes we go and we tell ourselves, I messed up the plan that God had for me. I messed it up. I messed it up because of my decisions, the things that I did, the things that I failed to do, the things that I'm doing. I messed it up because why? Sometimes, why we feel this way? Because what we are getting is not what we intended to get. Because of what we're getting now, it wasn't what I was intended to get. We always tend to say, I messed it up because this is not what I wanted. What I'm getting is not what I wanted. So my plan, the plan that God has for my life, I messed it up. This is not what he has in store for me. This is not what I wanted. This is not what I wish I could have gotten. I messed it up. And I've been there. I was literally 18 years old when I started falling away from God. And by the time I was 24, I decided, you know what, nothing is working in my life. I tried everything that I could think it was going to make it happen and make it better for me. And at that point, you know what, I came back and I said, I'm going back to my father. Like the prodigal son said, he got up, he went back to his father and said, I messed up. I sinned against you and against heaven. I'm not worthy of be called your son. Treat me like one of your employees. I felt myself was in the same situation, the same shoes. I had 6 years, literally 6 years, that I feel like I wasted in my life, that I didn't follow what I thought it was my purpose, my plan in God, and I feel like I messed it up. And at that point, I don't know what to do. I didn't know what to do, whether I go forward, because I felt like 6 years of my life, I didn't do nothing, and I basically felt like I let God down in what he intended to do in my life, because my current situation at that moment didn't actually look like what I knew it was supposed to look in his hands. So at this point, I know many of you feel the same. Many of you feel like what I got is not what I wanted. My life is not what I intended to be. I make plans to be further. And I found myself at that time, I said, I should have been further by now. And I know this is a question that a lot of you ask when you look at your life, when you look at your age, when you look at what your accomplishment, you say, you know what, I'm 36, I'm 40, I'm 50. I'm 45. I should have been further right now. I should have been further in life in my relationship. Maybe I'm not following what God has in my life. Maybe I have no hope anymore. And that's the problem. When that question, that when we confront ourselves in the mirror and say, you know what, you should have been further by now. When that question is asked in our life, the next stop, if we're not careful, we fall into a depression because we start measuring our current situation compared to our standard of our expectation of where we should have been, or maybe we're looking at somebody else that has the same age that we have, and we actually look in their accomplishment, what they already done, and then you know what, my family is not the way I was supposed to. I should have lived in a big house. Now this is all I have, a little corner. Or I didn't even have my own place. I live with my parents, and you think I should be out of my parents' basement right now. Well, if you're 45, I think you should think about it. But and sometimes when we actually compare ourselves with others, we most of the time we're gonna fall short because we're always gonna find somebody that is doing better than us, so we can compare to what we're doing now. And when we actually compare ourselves and we are constantly thinking that we should have been further in life by now, and God's plan for our lives and our plans for our life, we are if we're not careful, we fall into what is called depression. We become depressed, we become sad, we lose motivation, and now at this point, we become unhappy because we keep telling ourselves, you should have done it differently, you should have been further by now. But what happens when your plans got derailed? What happened when everything went south and nothing looked like what you expected? It's like when you order something online and you have this idea of what it should be, especially when you order clothes online that you really don't know your size, and you think you're gonna look like the person you saw wearing the clothes online, and when they come and you put them on, you don't look nothing like what you expected. That's sometimes how our lives are looking, especially in this time. When in January 2020, you didn't know that today, on November, you were going to be walking around with a mask because you were going to be in the middle of a pandemic, and you lost your job, you lost a lot of things in your life, and you should have been further, and you think life is not what you expected. What happens when our plans or the plans of God doesn't look like what we expected? There's a guy named Paul. His name is Paul, and he learned something throughout his life that I believe it will be helpful to us to understand and see today, that can help us to relate to him. And sometimes when our plans don't go according to when our situation doesn't go according to our plans and nothing functions and nothing looks the same, we tend to feel like discouraged, because what happens is when we have an idea of what God was intended for me, when we have an idea of what should have been, or when my life is not the way I wanted it to be, or my family is not the way I wanted it to be, what we call that is we call this interruptions. An interruption is when your current situation is not going according to your plans. When your current events are not going according to what you wanted to be or where you wanted to be in life. That's an interruption. That's a disruption of your events. That's an interruption. It's like COVID-19. We never thought we were going to have to do what we did in the past 5 months, 6 months, 7 months. And now we're in the middle of an interruption. We're in the middle of trying to see whether I'm going to keep the same job or I'm going to have to look for another job because it's no longer relevant for the situation that the world is right now. Maybe in a relationship, you thought you were going to die with the person you were with, and now you're in the middle of a breakup. You thought that was the one for you, and you were going to die with a person, and now you find out that you're going to have to start filing the papers for divorce. So at this point, sometimes when things don't go according to plan, they call interruption. And this guy named Paul, it's someone that can relate to us. It's someone that went through a lot of interruptions, and I'm going to mention a few of them before I bring up what he's going to talk to us about today. Some of the interruptions that he went through: he was thrown in prison unjustly. He was flogged. He was whipped 39 times. He was beaten with rods 3 times, almost stoned to death. There was a time that it got so dangerous where he was that they brought him out of a window with ropes because they were looking for him to kill him. And he almost was stoned to death. And he had a shipwreck 3 times. He was going to an island, and the ship that the ship and where he was, it got wrecked 3 times. He got lost and he didn't know where he was. And all his plans got interrupted. In the middle of all that, in the middle of all this happening to his life, he could have said, my life is it's not going according to plans. He could have said, you know what? This is not God's purpose for my life. I don't know what's going on. I'm in jail, thrown in jail unjustly. I didn't do nothing. All I wanted to do was to actually save people, teach people about Jesus. And this is where I am today. Imagine being whipped 39 times, beaten with rods 3 times, and being searched out to kill you. And your life is a total mess. Paul is a guy that went through so many interruptions in his life. And guess what he said? And this is where I would like you to bring your attention today. There was a part in the scripture that Paul says, he goes and shares with us. He said this in the verse 28 in Romans. He said, and we know that in all things God works. In all things God works. What he's trying to tell us right now is that even when my ship was wrecked in the middle of the sea, even when I was being whipped 39 times, even when I was in jail unjustly, all those things, God was using them to actually work with me. All those interruptions in my life were being used to actually God work through them. And an interruption is nothing more like when you're walking in your path and you find a stone in the way. And there's something in the way. And you got a little stone, something that gets in your shoes. And maybe it would be that you couldn't make it at work because you got a flat tire. That could be an interruption during your day and your plans. But some people have small interruptions. Other people have a bigger interruption. They lost their job. But sometimes in life, when we have so many plans, there's bigger interruption. Maybe you lost a marriage. Someone that you wanted and you loved died and passed away. And now you don't know how you're going to make it. And that's not just a little interruption. This is a huge. You have to do a career change and you have to start all over. When you thought you already had it like that and everything was going according to plans, now you have to start all over. Sometimes we face little interruption. You just bump into something you were not expecting, and now you have to change your day, your schedule of the day. Sometimes you have to change your week. But sometimes you have to change your entire life because everything changed. When the person walked out of you, now you're going to have to start thinking about another relationship, getting another job, trying to live with without somebody that passed away. And sometimes life comes with instruction. And Paul says, we know that in all things, God is at work. So basically, when my plans are not working, I need to be reminded that God is working. And this is important because if you keep this in the worst of your times, you'll be reminded that God is doing something even when things are not working. Even when your plan is not working, God is at work. Paul knew that God was with him even when the ship that he was in got wrecked in the middle of the sea. Paul had to tell himself, God is with me, even though he was in jail and he wasn't guilty. Paul has to be reminded in the middle of the pain when he was being whipped 39 times and he was being almost stoned to death. He had to say, God, you're with me. I don't know how this is going to work. Imagine the scene when you're hurting, when you're in pain, when you're crying out, when you're crying every night just to go to sleep. Some things doesn't make sense. But Paul said at the end of the day, he got the revelation to say that we know that in all things God works. But he didn't leave it like that. He said he works, not only he's working, but in all things he works. And he adds something else. He says he works for the good of those who love him. He works for the good. Basically, in all things, bad and good, all those things, God is working. And everything, and I can tell you 100%, and everything that is going on in your life, that is not, even if it's not according to your plans or God's plans for your life, according to your expectation, I can tell you right now, God is at work at that, and he's going to make it work for the good. It's not that it's good, it's that it's going to work for good. This is something worth repeating. It's not that what you're going through is good. I relate with you. I've been in some situations that I don't feel good, but I can tell you after I went through them that it was good that I went through those. It was good that I was afflicted, because there's some things that if you wouldn't gotten through them, you would not be where you are right now, or you would not be who you are right now. Sometimes you cannot be married to the person you're married today if you would have stayed with the person that left you yesterday. Sometimes you have to look back and thank God for the stuff you went through, because today is better, because God used and made it work. Yesterday, what happened to you worked for the good today. And Paul learned that through difficulties, through interruption, and through so many different stuff he was going through. It wasn't that the schedule changed. It wasn't a little interruption. It was huge. It was big. It was almost stoned to death. It was life or death. And he went through all those things, and he learned. And he learned that in all things, he works for those he loved. And he doesn't stay there. He goes and add. He goes and add and says, and we know, and who have been called. And he said, I'm going to repeat the entire verse. It says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And this is where I want to stop today, because sometimes our lives are not going according to our plans. And everyone has these questions in their life. The question that everyone has is, does God has a plan for me? And I'm here to tell you today what I learned from Paul and what I see in Paul's life, that God just doesn't have a plan for you. Because if you think God has a plan for you, when things are not going according to plan, you probably would just walk away from God. But Paul is saying something better, far better than just a plan. God has something far better than a plan for your life. He has a purpose for your life. A plan can fail, but a purpose gives significance. Whenever you achieve your plans, you become a successful person. But whenever you achieve your purpose, you become a significant person. I'd rather have a purpose than have plans, because plan can go wrong, but purpose is eternal. Purpose gives you significant. Purpose gives you a reason why. Let me put it this way. When things don't go according to plan, that doesn't mean you haven't lost your purpose. You might not be where you wanted to be, but you still have purpose. What Paul is saying, because I have a purpose, it doesn't matter what I go through, I'm still significant. I have a purpose in my life. I'm going to end up well. Purpose has to do with the why you were created, not the what you're going through. Purpose has to do with why, not with what. You might be going through something, and I know you're going through something, but that something that you're going through is a what. But God created you with a why. He created you for something bigger than your circumstances. He created for something bigger than your depression, than your pain, than whoever left you, whoever is not in your life, whatever. You thought life was supposed to be this nice picture of happiness, but right now it's full of pain. What I'm telling you, if you bring your plans that failed to God and bring it to him, he can bring you into purpose when your plans fail. So God has something far better than plan for you. He just doesn't have a plan. He has a purpose for your life. And then Paul doesn't leave it there. He tells us what the purpose is. He goes and says in the next verse, he says, for those, and 29 says, for those God has foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. So in other words, what Paul is saying, that we were created with the purpose to be conformed to the image of the Son of God, to be conformed, to look like Christ, to become like Christ, to become love. And when you become love, when you aim to become love, when you aim to become like the Son of God, like Christ, when you actually have a purpose, what's your purpose? Oh no, I know that everything that I'm going through, God is using it to make me into someone that he intended for me to be. Basically, it's like having a kid, it's being a parent. You really want that child to become someone someday. It doesn't matter what they go through, what they have or don't have. At the end of the day, you want that their character, their person, the persona inside of them become somebody. What God is intending to do, he's using the stuff that are failing in your life to make you a better person, to make you in the image of his son, Jesus Christ. And by the way, if you don't know Jesus, you should be interested to get to know him, because when you know Jesus, you're going to know that Jesus is the representation of God on earth, and he is love. And let me tell you, sometimes it doesn't matter what you have or don't have. When you are a person and you're becoming love and you're becoming like the Son of God, all things work for good for those that love God. And Paul says the purpose of God in your life is to use everything you go through to make someone out of you, not to give you something. So if you think that your life was that you were born just to acquire things, let me tell you something different. Your plan is not to get full of things. Your plan is to become someone, and that someone is in the image of the Son of God. So I'll tell you this much. When life interrupts the plan, look for God's purpose. When life comes in a way that doesn't look like what you wanted, look for God's purpose. In other words, take what's happening to you and make it work for God's purpose in your life. Sometimes I know I'm not trying to make sense of everything that you're going through or that you have gone through, but I can tell you this much. When your life, when your plans don't make sense, look for his purpose, because in his purpose there is perfection. In his purpose there's hope. In his purpose there is something to look forward to, even when the plans have failed. So I'm going to ask you the question that is screaming to be asked. What interruption are you going through now that God can use to conform you into his image? What are you going through right now that instead of being complaining about, you can say, you know what, I'm going to use this. I'm going to bring it to God so he can use it to bring me into purpose, to make me more like his son, to make me more like his son who is love. What am I going through that can make me a better person, that can give me significance instead of achievement and success, that can give me a reason why I stay alive, a reason why I should go forward? What are you going through right now that you can use and bring it into his hands? What is the interruption? Is it that you lost your job? That might be an opportunity to get to know God as a provider. Is it that you lost someone? That might be an opportunity for you to get closer to God. Because if your today doesn't look like what God's purpose for your life, all you have to do is give him your today. And today is going to transform and become into what he intended for your life. Sometimes we don't know what's going on, and we don't know how to react and how to handle. But when life gets tough, when life gets interrupted, we should know that we can bring that into God and tell him, God, use this to make me a better person. Use this to make me and to conform me, to form me, to make me into your image or the image of your son. So I'll give you a couple of questions to consider. I would like you to consider the next. Why don't you consider letting God be your good and loving Father? And when I say these questions, I remember something that just happened to me yesterday. And I was in my mother-in-law's house, and I was in the living room, and all of a sudden I hear a boom on the floor, and it sounded like a head hit the floor. And it actually, after the sound, I hear my little girl crying, and I know automatically what happened. She just bumped her head. And then when I go into the room, my wife was already there, and then she said, no, I want to go to Daddy. I want to go to Daddy. So at that moment, I felt like special. So she wanted to come to me, and she found comfort. I just rubbed her head. Everything was becoming better. It wasn't nothing bad. But at that moment, I learned that there's a lot of times when her decisions are going to bring her some consequences and some pain. But when she was in the middle of the pain, Maybe I wasn't able to take the pain away, but she felt better just by bringing it to me because she knew I cared for her. But maybe this is what we need to do. Sometimes what we do brings some consequences, but we don't have to deal with them alone. We don't have to stay in the pain. Why don't we consider bringing our interruptions, whatever is not working in our life, and bringing it to our loving Father, because He's there to do it and to care for us. Like I said last week, or the week before, God wants to do something on earth, and He wants to do it with you. And He wants you to bring your whatever doesn't make sense in your life, just to put it in His hand. And you'll be able to look back at it and say, like Paul says, all things work together for those who love the Lord. And the other thing I would like you to consider is believing that the life that He wants to give you is better than the one that you are planning to get for yourself. Why don't you give yourself the chance to know that whatever that you're planning for your life, maybe God has a better plan and a better purpose for your life. And at the end of the day, why don't you allow God to use your interruptions in your life to conform you into His image? Why don't we allow God to take everything that is not working in our lives to make us better, to make us someone better. Bring our brokenness, because great things comes from broken things, but you have to be able to bring it to the right person. Why don't we allow God to take what is not working in our lives, everything that is not working, and bring it to Him? And He'll say, God, I cannot make sense of what's going on in my life. I don't know why He left. I don't know why I lost it. I don't know why we're going through a pandemic. I don't know what am I going to do. There's a lot of stuff in my life that do not make sense, but I'm going to bring it to you because I learned that having a purpose is more important than having a plan. And I know you have a purpose for my life. And this might sound unbelievable to you, but Paul probably went through a little bit more than probably a lot of us have gone through. We've just been going through a pandemic and maybe lost our job. You might not be whipped 39 times, lost in the sea. He went through so much. He was in jail for so many times. And when he looked back to all the things that he went through, he said, everything that happened to me, it had to happen. It had a reason, and it was for a better purpose. Remember this. Plans will only give you success, but a purpose will give you significance, will make you someone. It will give you a reason why to move forward. Let's bring all of our interruptions into His hands, because God just don't have a plan for our life. He has something far more better. He has a purpose for me. He has a purpose for you. Let us pray. Father, in the name of your Son, I give you thanks for today, for everyone, everyone that is here and everyone that is online. Thank you for everyone that is exposed to this word. Thank you for Paul that left this tremendous teaching written for us to know that it doesn't matter what's going on in our lives. It doesn't matter the interruptions. It doesn't matter what is not okay. Let us know that you have a purpose for us and that we can actually hold ourselves from that hope that everything is going to work together for good at the end of the day. Even the worst situation in our lives, it's our faith that you're going to make it work for good. Thank you for sending your Son, and thank you for giving us the purpose to be conformed into His image. Help us be more like Christ so we can have a life of significance. In the name of your Son, amen and amen. Whatever you do, do not miss next Sunday. We'll be right here, and we'll love to connect with you. So let us know that you're watching, and let us know if you want to be part of a church. Guess what? We're looking for you. I hope you're looking for us. See you next time.